one of the things that we've asserted for a while is that dependability is certain. I've asserted this at least anyway. I've argued that in our industry, we've got a proven rate of customer retention that hovers somewhere around 85%. Now, fluctuations in commodities like $600 lumber versus $350 lumber and other factors always play into this. But what I truly believe is that we've seen this, that you lose some customers. Therefore, the irrefutable law of math is that we have 15% turnover. Therefore, the closing ratio we can expect on new business hovers somewhere around 15%. And we've been through this before. And again, I don't want to bore you too much with this because I want to add some new dimensions to this. But I've asserted for a while that our problem is we manage our future results in the rear view mirror. So we ask a sales rep, how are you going to get to your 3.6 million? How are you going to get to your next year's sales goal? And what we do is we measure the results after they occur, this rear view mirror management. And I want to share some new thoughts with you that I haven't shared before. One is an improvement to this slide, this dimension. So what you see is a sales rep in January who's expected in a $3.6 million territory to get $300,000 a month. And it's just kind of a slow grind of failure. And what ends up happening is the sales rep's halfway through the year and he's not doing it, she's not doing it, whatever. And that's great for an individual salesperson. My concern for all of us on this roundtable team is that you've got a lot of budgeting to plan for next year. You've got to figure out how many staff members you're going to need, what types of ordering policies you're going to have, a lot of expenditures, which you can allocate for everything. And I think it's going to become more incumbent upon us this year to do a better job of budgeting. That means the right planning. So one of the things that we've talked about in the past, and Elise and I worked really hard to enhance this, is that if I've got a sales goal, it's an increase typically. You might change that this year. You might decide, maybe we shouldn't be increasing it this year. So what we do is we say, well, I've got some customer retention and I've got to grow, and you know, I have to accept the fact that there's this attrition, and that's what I do, right? What I want to do is discuss some of these rates of attrition and retention, all right? So the real issue is finding the right growth goal. That's how we always think. And if the closing ratio is 15%, if the rate of market attrition is 15%, and if they are equal, we've established a closing ratio for future sales. I believe that that's a fair number to hold on to. It's a market average worth accepting unless you've done some good measurements of that. I haven't talked with Bobby privately about this recently. He's been better. He's been better than anybody. And another client I have, which is a very large client I'm working with this year, where we're starting to build some of these pieces of data. But what I want for you who haven't done this is how to build this real closing ratio. And I'm not talking about quote logs. I'm not talking about looking at how many quotes you close and all that, because that is not a good measure. I took the slide out today, but I'm not a big fan of quote logs as a measurement as a leading indicator. Quote logs don't give you, they mix prospects and customers together, so you don't get benchmark data on how well you're closing new target business. I don't like quote ratios because they don't give you benchmark data on what the actual value of your prospecting is. For example, if I just saw a sales rep who quoted a $10,000 house job of windows, decking, whatever, pick a product, it looks like a $10,000 quote in the system, but it actually might be a $200,000 lead if a guy's building 20 houses a year. So I don't think quote logs are enough. I'm talking about closing ratios on target, new, annualized value business for those relationship customers and the one-time value for those commercial, special projects, okay? But this becomes this benchmark prospecting number. I want to ignore that for today. I'm not as worried about that today as I am worried about helping you guys figure out how your individual salespeople and all you salespeople on this call can do a better job of budgeting. So typically we say, okay, I've got $3 million and my goal for the upcoming year is 3.3, and that's a $300,000 increase. Easy peasy, everybody gets that, okay? And so we say, well, great, that's my growth goal, and I think I can do it because I've lined up 2 guys that I think are going to buy from me. Here's the problem. We didn't factor in for attrition yet. We didn't factor in for the gap, and that $300,000 is not enough to offset what we need to accomplish in the coming year. And so much of my energy and efforts in my career, and I'm apologizing for this, have been emphasizing prospecting, and I'm not going to stop that, and I'm absolutely, completely passionate about that. But what I wanted to do is talk about, let's really figure out what that prospecting number needs to be, and let's do a better job of analyzing it. If you just put $300,000, you're going to be short. You need to fill the gap. So your actual prospecting number is your desired growth goal plus your rate of attrition. And that becomes a very important issue. But now I got to ask you something. What if in the remainder of 2020 and moving into 2021, what if the total market opportunity shrinks? What then? And this is my biggest concern. My nieces, a woman, just an adorable woman who's now, I was going to say girl, but she's 28 years old now, 29. She lived with me and my wife for a while. She's living with a young man. He's a doctorate of economics at Johns Hopkins University. And I got to read a paper of his, and I'd talk more about it if I actually understood it all. He's so damn brilliant. But the nuts and bolts of it are, one, thankfully, our government, our federal government's done a decent job with the PPP and the other bailouts and the other programs to stabilize the economy in the short term. He talks about bond yields, bond variance, the rate of treasuries, high-risk bonds, which are at a level of change not seen since the really Great Depression. And so there's a lot of factors out there, jobless claims. There's a lot of things that tell me there's some fair reason to be nervous about the economy in the coming year and a half. And hey, you know what? If it grows, yay, fantastic. But let's not kid ourselves. We have been lucky and sheltered ironically, we took the brunt of it in 2008 in that depression. We've been lucky so far because we're still filling the orders. Things are going pretty well, but depending how long this crazy thing lasts, we don't know. There's a lot of liquidity, consumer liquidity that's really been gone. Again, this paper, and I wish I could talk more about it. I want to actually talk to him about it. His name is Vadim. He's brilliant. But what I'm concerned about is he talks about household savers versus spenders. I'm wondering how many families right now are using credit card debt as their salvation for the time being. Unemployment claims continue to rise. So I think it's incumbent upon us to plan for some really serious challenges coming up. And the reason I asked you to invite your salespeople on this call, and the reason I stopped and went back to that slide, I forgot to record from the very beginning, but I am recording this, so you will all have access to this if you want to walk through this with your salespeople. At least you'll help me figure out how we can post this somewhere privately on our website, or maybe we'll post it even on our platform and just give everybody access to it there, something like that. But I want you guys all to be able to have this if you think it's a good reference tool for you in the future. But my concern is you don't know what your retention is going to be in the coming year, and therefore forget about what past sales were. We've got to start working off of a premise about what's going to happen in the future. So I want to tell you about a case study that I experienced. Welcome, Jeff Taki. I see you just showed up. Hi, brother. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, my brother. I'm muting you with everybody else. And by the way, just so you heard that you just missed it, I didn't record much on my first slide, which was that transactional dependability, but I am recording everything else. We will make this webinar accessible for everybody if you want to share with your guys afterwards, okay? All right. So we just don't know. And I want to share with you a case study. Some of you might know Alzwin Kieboom. He used to be with Green Guard, super guy. He's been involved in our industry for a while. And he's now with a different company. And I had the privilege of doing some work with them this past year. And one of the things we worked on was budgeting. And so it was really nice to see, because this was earlier in the year. And their vice president of sales shared with me a lot of data. And what he shared with me was an actual 2019 or 2018. This is important. He shared a 2018 plan with me, what his sales reps' game plan was for 2018, and I did an analysis of it. And after looking at it with absolute certainty, I said, this is a flawed process. Let me tell you what this young man did. The numbers you were looking at are all fictitious. They're not his numbers, but they are similar to his numbers. And I really have taken almost identically what his layout was. I just diminished it by about 1 0. He was really running a $6 million territory or $7 million territory rather than a $750,000 territory. But he was asked to do a forecast with never having done this before, and he did what a lot of salespeople do, and I've seen this over the years. He simply said, well, let me figure out, if they're going to tell me I've got to sell $750,000 this coming year, let me figure out how I'm going to do it. So he took his sales goal, and he presumed 100% growth from his existing customers. In other words, he said, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to figure out a way to grow my existing customer business. Well, that's great, but you necessarily can't ensure that every one of these customers are going to grow. It's a flawed process. It's flawed because you must accept attrition occurs. And this allows a sales representative to fool himself into believing he can just work really hard and smart and all this other stuff without measuring the data. So what I did was I asked the vice president, I said, he goes, he hit his goal. I go, well, I'm sure he did, but not this way. I want you to appreciate this for a minute. This is a company who's paying me my fees. I'm sitting on the phone with this guy. We're planning for the meeting, and without even seeing the data, I said, there's no way. I don't believe it. It's flawed. I need to see more. Can you supply me with the actual sales from these customers from 2018 or 2019, the previous year? And he did. From 2019, I'm sorry. From 2019, and he did. And this is what it looked like. What we saw was actual attrition occurred. And we can measure attrition. You've got the data. All you need to do is go back and look. All you need to do is run your previous 3-year sales by existing customers, who falls off, who goes down, who goes up. You can analyze this. But what this showed was more like a 10% rate of attrition here, which is fine. So it wasn't 15. So what? He had a rate of attrition. So now we know that if this were the actual attrition, he should have found a way to increase his sales by $200,000. And it turns out, like the manager said, he hit his goal. And the reason he hit his goal was because he added some new accounts. I want to stress this. This is a really important moment. This is the vice president of sales for a fair-sized company. And he's not seeing the actual ground-level data as closely as he should. And by the way, this guy is a superstar. I love the guy. We're working together closely. It's all cool, man. I'm not criticizing him as a person. I'm saying that the performance was not well thought out because nobody walked him through this before. So what we discovered when we looked at this was that when we added the new accounts, what we noticed was that those new accounts were enough to offset for the losses. The problem is it was accidental. The guy just lucked out. I shouldn't say lucked out. He worked hard. He had the numbers. But this is one of those situations that it did work out. But how many times in our careers as leaders, as salespeople, for those of us that have been salespeople, how many times in our careers have we fallen short of our goals because we didn't have a methodology in place? So what I'm arguing here is that what we really need to do is start factoring for this attrition. Again, I created this. It's fictitious, but it's also realistic because what I did was I started looking at historic attrition. So what you notice here is that in 2017, the sales rep had $635,000 worth of sales. Now, that's the good news. It was decent. We've got the data. We've got a number. The bad news is he lost some to attrition in 2018. You'll notice that Dudley Do-Right Construction completely, and I hope somebody's old enough to know who Dudley Do-Right is. Dudley Do-Right Construction lost it. They were gone. So did Acme Builders, no longer part of the game plan, part of the program. Meanwhile, he opened up a couple of new customers like Lewis Drywall and Simpson Windows and Tom Patterson Construction from 2017 to 2018, but there was still some attrition. In 2019, he lost Farmer Construction completely last year. Dudley Do-Right didn't come back. Premier Remodeling, who'd done some business with them, kind of fell by the wayside. Why did Premier Remodeling fall by the wayside? You know why Premier Remodeling fell by the wayside? Because it's really a $100,000 account or a $200,000 account. But on paper, it looks like a $20,000 account, and somebody didn't pay it the love and attention it deserves. We allowed the inside sales rep to manage that relationship. We didn't examine that little gem in our box of rocks, as you've heard me talk about in the past. So instead of taking Premier Remodeling and recognizing we could have built that up to a $200,000 account, we took it for granted, and bam, it's gone. And that's part of my subtle message here. As we start moving towards the end of 2020, the second half of 2020, and into 2021, this is the time for your reps to get on the phone. This is the time to start analyzing their accounts. This is the time to start culling through the data to see where these opportunities lie, because we got to figure out, we don't know how 2020 is going to end, and we really don't know what's going to happen in 2021. So what I'm going to ship out to all of you is an asset that I hope you'll consider using. I think it's useful. I've used it many times in the past with different clients. I don't think I've stressed it enough for you guys here, but this is it. It's an account customer tracking form. And what I've done is I pre-formatted this so that this could really say 2020 sales. We'll come back to that in a minute. But I pre-formatted it so that your sales reps, and I want them to do this. I want you sales reps to do this. I want you to take ownership of the data in your territory, and managers host those one-on-one meetings with them. So you take Davis Construction, Elise Herman, Design Build, and you plug in their numbers for 2019, and this was a $50,000 account, and here you had Elise Herman who's kicking it and whatever it might be, I don't know. And then you start setting your budgets for the coming year. Instead of doing what most salespeople do, right? They take their previous year budgets and they do one of these, right? They do all right, I guess I got to set my budgets for next year. That's not budgeting. That's a pipe dream. That's a hope that that everything's going to work out. Or worse yet, they do this equals this times 1.1 because they told me I got to get a 10% increase. So I'll just start tracking and see how close I am doing to that. It's the same rear view mirror management. What I want the sales rep to do is sit down and pick up the phone and call me, Davis Construction, and say, how's it going, Rick? I'm looking for a job. What? Yeah, you know anybody? Here, Elise Herman might be hiring. I'm like, okay, great. And I don't know. So that just became a zero. And Elise turns out she's got some whatever big things going on because of what she does. And she says, I'm going to be down this year, but I'm still pretty optimistic, whatever. This person is growing, whatever. So you examine every gem one at a time in that box recs. My experience with sales reps are they really stink at this budgeting process. They really do. Not because they're not intelligent, not because they're lazy, but because they either A, don't have a process in place, or B, they just feel like they don't have the time. And the reason I wanted to call this meeting now, right now is a unique time of opportunity, and it's this time where we can do those important not urgent things. And I think that important, not urgent thing to do right now is a little bit of planning for the remainder of the year and get this practice in place so you can become better at it as an individual salesperson for all of you on the call, so you can be better at it moving forward as we finish up 2020 and start looking at what 2021 is going to look like. I think it's a good opportunity to get ahead of the information curve. What I did here is I laid out what this could look like for this fictitious sales representative. So what ends up happening is a sales rep every quarter, and by the way, this is how I've done it for years. I do it quarterly. So what we do is we take the, in fact, here, let me do it this way. Sorry, thought I had this all wired. I just created this morning for you guys. Oops. Okay, something's wrong here. Doesn't matter. What I want you to see here is that we've taken and created an actual budget for the coming year. What does this mean? It means the sales rep has actually figured out, by going to all their customers and having the dialogues, where the opportunities lie. This doesn't have to mean we're going to lose business, because what we should be doing right now with some of these calls is figuring out what other players might be dropping the ball on something. Where can I add 2 products to the mix that I wasn't selling before? How can I have one of these virtual meetings to get my window specialist, my millwork specialist, my kitchen specialist on the line and talk to some of these people? And a call I just had with a client, a specific client, one of their millwork specialists said, hey, you guys got to get me in front of your customers. That's how I help you close deals. And I thought, wrong answer. You don't need to get in front of them. You need to talk to them somehow. You need to, he literally said, you got to take me to the job sites. Belly to belly is the only way I can make this work for you. That's wrong. What we need our sales reps to do is start doing some customer one-by-one analysis now. Because if you wait, I think you're going to be behind the 8 ball. I think you're going to be behind the curve. So that's the first part of what I'm seeing. Then once it all starts happening, what a good sales rep does is every quarter they fill in their data to see how well they're doing towards their actual goals. So in this case, the sales rep filled in the data for this time and said, okay, and hopefully there's some new accounts that are, you start filtering in some new accounts. So we know Premier Remodeling's gone, but it turns out that somewhere in the first quarter, I took my first order from Lewis and Clark Homes, right? I took my first order for Lewis and Clark Homes. This is the new customer that I'm going to actually start selling in the second quarter. And in the second quarter, I shouldn't do this way. I'll show you something. In the second quarter, where I added Lewis and Clark Homes, perhaps, that might come in right here, and that they might be $20,000 in the second quarter, let's say. I don't know, right? But the key here is that every quarter, your sales reps are measuring and learning a process that will enable them over the course of their career and yours as leaders to do a better job at coaching to this budgeting process.